Texas has now passed a law declaring that the Ten Commandments from the Bible need to be on a poster and they need to be visibly displayed to everyone in the classroom and all the public classrooms in Texas. Now, I'm in Texas. I've gone through the public education system here in Texas. Obviously, it's different from district to district, county to county. But when we look at what's happening, not just in Texas, but around the entire nation of the United States of America, yes, we have a cultural degradation, but the implementation of laws like this, coming from a policy point of view, is not how you change what happens in culture, right? Policy is using law enforcement to go after laws to uphold and back what you have written down in those books. So if you have if someone doesn't want to put the Ten Commandments poster in their classroom, you are now going to have law enforcement or fine, penalty, whatever the dictation is of the hierarchy of the severity of the crime. You have law enforcement, fine, etc. If someone doesn't want to put that in their classroom, you're using enforcement to back up that claim. Now, that's not going to change the person's mind, whether you're a teacher or just people in the classroom. That's not going to change their mind for the most part when it comes to genuine, authentic adjustment of what they believe in their worldview, right? What is the ideal? First and foremost, this is unconstitutional because you're combining church and state. You're using a specific religious ideology separate from objective ideology. So you have religious ideology and you're implanting it within the realms of state, which is through law, through policy. So that, first and foremost, needs to be separated. We have that separated for a reason, so we don't become a theocracy, or we don't turn into a state that uses a different religious ideology to implant those beliefs. So even if it's the right beliefs, it still is necessary to split it up so that there's no potential for the wrong beliefs to come in and rule the state. Even though I agree that for the most part having the Ten Commandments is a positive affirmation to students, teachers, parents, etc., it still goes against the Constitution, and it doesn't change the root problem. Okay, the root problem is culture. Now, Texas doesn't have as big of a cultural problem as the rest of the states. California has a big problem. Oregon has a big problem. You go more towards the New England area, New York, Massachusetts. Like a lot of these states have problems when it comes to culture. So sure, Texas can be the front runner, but it really stems down to changing culture. Now, if you actually wanted to change culture, you would start from and this is a more difficult way to do this, right? Passing a law is like a shortcut, but it's not really a shortcut. It's a shortcut in the sense that you're passing a law to make a statement to say, this is how we're going to change the culture by using force, which that's one pathway to do it. But like I said, it's unconstitutional. And it's not going to change people's minds if you're forcing them to do something. Obviously, if you use force, you will change some people's minds, but you're not going to change the majority of people's minds by using force. It's more of a deterrent. And so they're just abiding by it because there's a deterrent in place. You have to go the long route, which is the more difficult route. This is, okay, you start with the administration of the school boards and of these schools, superintendents, the entire district, and then you go to counties. And you have to have people who believe in merit, who believe in the proper guidance, who believe in empathy. So being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes so you see perspective. And like that's one reason why we have individual rights. I know a lot of people will say, well, it comes from the Judeo-Christian morality clause. Okay. Yes and no. To even formulate those ideas, someone had to come up with the idea of empathy. If I don't want someone to slap me in the face, I shouldn't slap someone else in the face. Because there's a two-way street there and it's mutual, that's considered a right? And now we don't infringe on that right because there's a mutual understanding. There's a perspective there. So any action that you do, you're allowed to do in the United States from the constitutional point of view, unless someone else is collateral to that action. That would now be infringing on that person's right. And now that becomes unconstitutional. We have a lot of laws that are unconstitutional. They're in effect, but I'm speaking from the document that founded this nation, what the actual law of the land is, and the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So you have to start with the administration. These people need to care about empathy. They need to care about the proper guidance. They need to care about morality. Sure, they can be religious, or maybe they're not religious. Either way, if they have a certain worldview, that is now culture. That's what they believe in. Then they hire people, because they're going to hire people under them, upper management, middle management, teachers, etc., different faculty members. They're going to hire people for the most part who will have similar ideology. They don't necessarily need to agree on everything, but just the fact that they agree, hey, let's not cheat. Let's not steal, right? Let's have some integrity here. Just start with the basics, and then you can progress onwards. When you attack the schools, and you're positively attacking the schools, from a cultural point of view, from the top down, it's more difficult. It takes more time. There's a lot more groundwork involved. You have to have a lot of these discussions with these people. That is what is necessary to actually changing the culture in schools, aside from putting a poster up. Like putting a poster up, you may be able to give some free reign to teachers, a little bit of free reign. Now, I will say it is a public school, but you're also hiring people. Why I'm saying it's public school. In a public school, you have all your constitutional rights. It's different than a private school. In private school, you don't have your constitutional rights on private property, but you have your constitutional rights. Well, you do have you have your civil liberties on private property, but like freedom of speech, you don't have on private property. Whoever owns the property can kick you out. But if you're in public school, you technically, by the Constitution, have freedom of speech. Now, because you're a faculty member, you still are at the behest of the people who hired you, the upper management, but there's still some room there. There's still some give. You have some direction in your classroom. So maybe you can still put a poster up, but from a cultural point of view, not from an enforcement point of view. So when you hire these teachers, the faculty members, and you implant the right, you're not just implanting culture, but you're putting the right people in places who deserve that job. Just like if you're the president of the United States, you don't want to hire a bunch of 20 people who maybe don't have any qualifications or the ideology that you have, and then give them your belief system, give them your set of beliefs, and say, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to enforce it against you guys. That's not going to be cohesive. They're not going to work well together. You're not most likely going to achieve your goals as the president of the United States. You have to actually get people on board with your ideology, put them in place. They're already going to have the belief system in place. They built it up for 40, 50, 60 years. Sure, there will be differences, but everyone's aligned on the same goal, on the same vision. When you do that in the same way with teachers and faculty, you can have the right teachers in place who, they don't necessarily need a poster in the classroom. Maybe they do or do not put it up. But through their teachings, and I'm not saying they should throw in their ideology or beliefs within their teachings, because teaching is part of the curriculum. Sure, there's some subjectiveness to it, but a lot of it is objective, should be objective, like physics, different sciences, mathematics. But they could potentially throw in, if they're like a philosophy teacher, they could throw in their ideology, and they could say, this is my ideology, this is my opinion, my set of beliefs. I'm not saying it's correct, it's my worldview, not everyone, you can paint it in an abstract vision. But at least that ideology, that cultural morality is being implanted to the students for them to think about. If all the teachers right now, which most of the teachers lean on the left, even from a professional point of view in university, not just public schools, most of these teachers are on the left. And so oftentimes they're not creating the stipulation that this is my worldview, this is my opinion. They're often stating their opinion as fact. They're stating their belief system as fact. And they're giving that worldview, again, as fact, to like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of students every single year. And these students are going through 4 years of college with all of the authority figures, because professors are seen as the authority figures in college. They're also giving you your grades. And if you don't adopt that worldview within the 4 years, you may not get a good grade in class. Your peers won't like you, because remember, all the peers also have that worldview. It's like a circulatory system of these ideas revolving in an echo chamber. There's no outside. See, universities used to, I know I'm translating from public schools, which is historically K through 12, to now universities. But this, that's higher learning. That's where you go to after public school if you decide to do that. Universities used to be a place of scholastic learning, of scholastic affairs. You go back to the Library of Alexandria, people would come together, scholars from different places of the world. They had papers as scrolls, and there were thousands of scrolls there. They would discuss and debate ideas. A lot of people disagreed. When you go back in the scientific community, apart from now, because right now, like 96% of scientists agree culturally from a certain focal point, but it's not necessarily the correct point of view, because they're not using scientific empirical data. They're using a lot of, abstract subjective metrics. But if you go back in time, sure, people would have dogmatic views that were incorrect, but a lot of people would come in and they would debate those ideas. And that was more accepted from a university point of view. Right now in university, that's not accepted. You can't speak out. You can't raise your hand. We have, I've heard the story so many times, but Yeonmi Park, a North Korean defector, went to Columbia University, and even she was shunned for asking questions about wokeness and LGBT and all this kind of stuff. Not to say that people don't deserve rights. Of course, everyone, we're all humans. We all deserve human rights. And when you're in America, you have certain civil liberties that are afforded to you. It's more about taking identity politics, taking subjective views, taking misinformed or miscalculated metrics, and then throwing it on the entire demographic of the United States and gearing all of our actions towards a minority, right? I'm just kind of simplifying it a little bit. She could not even, as a North Korean defector from one of the worst, most isolated places on the planet, ask these questions. She was actually oppressed. She was a victim. But when she was in class, and this is her anecdote, we have data on this, and a lot of this is out there publicly, not just from Columbia University, but from other universities. You have actual direct evidence, video footage, leaked audio, things like that. But from her anecdote, the teachers were creating this idea of victimhood, whether it's your race, color, creed, religion, rather than presenting, hey, you're in the land of the free, you're in the land of opportunity. Yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages with all of us humans, but in this country, you can make it through a meritocratic system. In other countries, you can't. Some countries, there's a little bit of give and take, but for most countries, and historically speaking, for most empires, you couldn't move up and down the socioeconomic hierarchy. In the United States, that is possible. Now, there are powers at place that are being enacted in America to suppress people so that they can't move up and down. Well, they can't move up the hierarchy. They can definitely move down. That way, there's a barrier to prevent. There's a barrier to create a rift and a void, so people at the bottom can't compete with people at the top. So that is a concern, 100%. But the idea that certain people are victims and other people are not victims, and there are people who are oppressors, and look, all that exists, but with different races and different religions throughout humankind. This is not a new phenomenon. But to have the mindset of, well, it's pointless, I should be nihilistic, that's not how we approach things, right? So we do need the right mindset. We do need the right ideology, the right type of morality, the right empathy. But this stems from the difficult process of actually having hard conversations with people and going the long route of implanting culture into public schools versus just putting up a sign, which, great, it's a sign, okay? It's not a big deal. This is a small, trivial thing. But there are certain principles that we have here. So even though it's a small poster, we have to recognize unconstitutional mixing church with state. Also, it's not solving the root problem. It's not solving the root issue. When we understand what the root problem is and we understand how to fix it, it's an arduous task. But that is what is necessary if we're going to spend the next 5, 10, 20 years, whatever is remaining, obviously people who are watching this are different ages, whatever is remaining of your life, those years spending towards a productive path of changing this generation so that the next generation, well, the generation that we're teaching, can make sure that the next generation is not implanted with indoctrination. Every generation has a duty and a responsibility to make sure that they do what they can to ensure the right values, the right principles, the right morality, the right ideas. Sure, people can have discussions and judgment and will disagree on many things. And maybe within that group, even if you give all these ideas to people and they have the ability to discern, they may not discern correctly and they may become socialists or communists, whatever, fine. In America, you're able to do that. But we still have a duty to make sure that these ideas are heard and we can freely speak. And not to live in an echo chamber, because all it takes is one generation for everything that we have here, everything that we've built up for the past 250 years to disappear.